morning, as we continue our focus on the most interesting new books, Robert E. Lee and Me. The author is former Army Brigadier General Ty Seidule, who served his country for more than 30 years. He retired last year, he says, so he could finally speak his mind in full. His book is a searing attack, not just on his upbringing, but on some ugly parts of America that endure. You feel the history here.
Oh, there is so much history, starting with George Washington.
Growing up, Ty Seidule says all he wanted to be was a Southern gentleman. His hero, a top graduate of the U.S. Military Academy, former superintendent at West Point, and the commander of the Confederate Army, Robert E. Lee.
When you grew up, you said you held Robert E. Lee as an 11 on a scale of 1 to 10, and Jesus was a 5. That's something.
Yes, so on a scale of 1 to 10, Lee was the greatest, not only the greatest general that ever lived, but the greatest human being. And everything I had around me growing up in Alexandria, Virginia, made me think that.
And so what changed all that?
Here, living at West Point.
After attending Washington and Lee University, named for both George Washington and Lee, Seidule served in the Army in Kosovo, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq, just to name a few, before becoming a history professor at West Point.
I lived in Lee Road, in Lee housing area, by Lee Gate. And I was walking one day by Lee Barracks, and I just stopped. And I just looked at that sign and looked at that sign. And then I looked east about 20 yards, and they had a new statue of Lee there. And I just wondered why West Point had all these things named after Lee. I understood Washington and Lee. I didn't understand that. And that started it. And then I went into the archives.
The result of that work, his new book, Robert E. Lee and Me, A Southerner's Reckoning with the Myth of the Lost Cause. The Lost Cause is a 150-year-old ideology that advances the belief that the Confederate cause was just and heroic. It has long been symbolized by Lee.
He was a cruel enslaver, someone who believed deeply, firmly, and really his entire life that human enslavement was the best social system for the South.
One of the reasons some people still celebrate Robert E. Lee is because they felt like he was a brilliant tactician and a good military strategist. You disagree with that?
He's a loser. He lost. We Americans like winners. So one, he lost. Two, the cause which he fought for. Could you imagine, Jeff, what this country would look like if they had won? We would have had a disastrous future.
So what are we looking at here right now?
This is Buffalo Soldier Field. It used to be Cavalry Parade Field until the early 1970s when black cadets forced the academy to change.
Where's Lee Barracks?
Lee Barracks is that way about a half mile.
I think what might surprise a lot of people is that all these things named after Lee here at West Point, it happened when integration was going on. It happened in the 1900s.
In fact, the first thing named after Lee is really 1930s. And the first African-American to come back to West Point in the 20th century as a cadet comes in the 1930s. And there's a portrait of him in Confederate gray that's put up in 1951, 52, and that's a reaction to the Army's integration.
6 years ago, Seidule posted a short online video about why the Civil War was fought. It has since received more than 34 million views.
The South was preoccupied with states' rights because it was preoccupied first and foremost with retaining slavery.
Thank you for the invitation.
He followed that video up by returning to his alma mater at Washington and Lee and doubled down in this 2017 speech.
Look at your left, look at your right. Lots of folks are uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable. Telling the truth is a ruthless act.
Was it odd giving that talk?
Oh, gosh, terrifying. Terrifying. I was going to call Robert E. Lee a traitor for slavery, standing on top of his grave. And behind me was the recumbent statue of Lee and Confederate regalia, really. So, yeah, I was nervous.
You had to resign your commission to be able to write this book and speak out the way you are now. Why did you feel that was so important?
Well, I had to retire. So I had to retire from the Army because I could not give, I couldn't be free. I mean, I couldn't exercise the First Amendment rights that I'm doing right now because it was too hot for the Army. The Army had these 10 bases named after Confederates, and it couldn't change them without our political masters, our civilian politicians, telling them they could. And it was just too hot for the Army.
But those are changing now.
Oh, they're changing. So
within 3 years.
Within 3 years, the National Defense Authorization Act will ensure that all of those are changing.
What else do you think should happen beyond that?
we've got to have truth.
What does truth mean for you then, besides changing the name of Fort Bragg and Fort Hood and the Lee monuments here at West Point? What does that truth mean?
Well, I think we've got to look at, in the Army, promotion rates.
The percentage of black cadets is more than reflective of society, but the number of black general officers is far from it. Images from the Capitol this month show that the Confederacy's lost cause has not been abandoned by all. Correct. But Seidule feels he is making progress, including in some unlikely places.
In the end of all of this, when you finished speaking, you got a standing ovation.
I got a standing ovation at Washington University for calling Lee a traitor for slavery, for telling my school to do more, to engage with the lost cause myth, to end their white supremacy, to be more just, and to lead the way. And they embraced me. And I tell you, I felt this warm glow of acceptance, you know. But as we all know, one speech doesn't change society and doesn't change a college.
What does?
Work, hard work, lots of it, over and over and over again.
So the latest defense bill has these 10 base names changing and also these memorials and commemorations at West Point within 3 years. Seidule is hoping that at West Point in particular, the names change within a year and not 3 years.
Telling the truth is a ruthless act. I mean, bravo. I have told you over and over and over again, the messenger matters. Is people like him who have a voice, who have a perspective coming from him. There's no better person, a Southerner, who's in the military.
Great stuff, Jeff.